I'd like to start with a compliance dashboard. This dashboard shows compliance against some key authoritative source documents. So these documents represent some California regulations and standards that need to be followed. The bar graphs are showing what controls have been implemented for each of them, which ones remain to be implemented, and which ones are partially implemented. This has an interactive filter, which would allow us to select from a list of various applications or organizations. If we drill into this state agency example, we'll see the graph update and show the details specific for this agency. This also can be drilled in. So if we look into this particular set that's not been implemented, we can see that there's really only two controls that are where our team needs to focus to improve the compliance for that particular authority document. Pulling the covers back a little bit, I'd like to show you that control framework that we talked about, the ARC content. At the base of this is a list of all of the documents that are in the library. And one of these documents is this state administrative manual. So if I go in and look at the details of that manual, I'll see that I have things such as a URL to the direct source of it. But one thing that's really valuable is you'll see the breakdown of that document into these 200 plus records. These citations are individual mandates. And by breaking them down, that allows us to accurately map the controls so that we know what section of this document needs to be met on each control. If I pick one of those citations, just go into one section, you can see the verbatim text exactly as it was in the document for that particular mandate. A really valuable piece then is to tie it to our harmonized framework. The control objectives, if I look into that particular control objective, one of the things that we can see is that all the other citations that need to meet that particular secure data storage control can be found. So this would include across several different documents that are in the library, things like PCI, NIST, IRS. So this supports the test once and comply to many strategy that is very efficient. Another key element is the baseline control procedures. This answers the question of how the organization has decided to address all these multiple sources to implement this particular control. So all those citations are gone through and synthesized into this baseline. Multiple options are provided to allow different types of entities that need to have to support this control to know which one of these baselines to use. If we then look at the fact that we've got these control objectives mapped into the risk statements, we can see that there's risk categories and risk topics. This is a 6x26 framework that we've created to allow roll-up of all these risks so that very high level reporting can be done. If we jump into the risk dashboard, we can see this roll-up and see what open risks are out there and which controls and risk areas they're involved in. We can also see the difference between the inherent and the residual risk. You'll notice that the residual risk is lower. This is showing the payoff, the benefit from the investment that your organization has made in controls. This has resulted into a 52% reduction in the risk that is being seen. If I jump in and see that there is another tab, this is particularly showing the risk for the residual risk. It has counts. It has a graph showing you the breakout from an impact on likelihood standpoint. Also, it will show you across entity types. So this can help you see the risks for, say, business services or applications or vendors. This also supports an interactive filter so that when you dive in, you can see the risk for that particular state agency as it's changed. I'm having a technical problem, I apologize. I'd now like to talk about the security assessment. So this would be a record that would be created by an analyst. It would be assigned to a user. The appropriate type of assessment template, in this case, we're doing an extended SSP, would be selected. And then this assessment would be sent off to the assigned user to answer. This would be available in an email, but also the user has access to a portal like this, where they can see all of the assessments that have been assigned to them. They can also see what issues are out there assigned to them, what controls they're dealing with. Once they navigate to the assessment, this would be what it would look like. So this is a fresh assessment, and there's a menu that allows us to dive in to the different categories. Starts off with simple questions like, what is the system title? This is the included privacy threshold assessment, which would allow people to determine whether additional privacy concerns exist. This extended assessment also includes sections around NIST controls. So these sections would allow the user and people that you share this assessment with to determine whether the controls were implemented, provide some comments, and has an extensive list of NIST controls that it tracks. This is what it would look like when it had been submitted and returned to the analyst. The analyst now has the ability to go back and look at that assessment, review the answers provided, put comments in the assessment, if need be, return it back to the person that was assigned to for corrections. Ultimately, they would put their analysis in, some comments, and move it through the approval process. One of the steps would be to create an issue. The issues represent the POAMs. We'll get into more detail with that next. We'll start with this issues dashboard. This allows the organization to track all the issues. You can see them based on what different type of issue they are, whether they're in progress, and it also has a similar interactive filter so that you can narrow in and see issues pertaining to specific groups. This is the detail for a POAM. This form also started by the analyst would be starting in the new phase and would be assigned to a issue owner, a bureau, a section, and then it would be moved into the response phase where it would be expected that that issue owner would now have to decide whether to remediate or accept. If they accepted, this would result in either a policy exception or a risk acceptance. And ultimately, if they decide to remediate it, they would have to define their remediation tasks. These are the milestones in the POAM. In this example, we have where they've done a partial remediation, been able to close that, but they're still in the process of fully remediating this issue. I'd like to now show the privacy assessment. This is very similar to the security assessment. One thing that is very helpful is that when it's first sent, the user only sees the threshold assessment. They're only asked questions to help determine if there are privacy concerns involved with their system. If they indicate that they are, they will see additional questions and categories appear where they can now provide more details about their system. This process, very similar to the security assessment, would result in the analyst getting to see those results, go through the same process of responding to them, making issues, putting in comments, and ultimately going through an approval process. Part of the end result of the assessment would be a report. And this report shows all of the information gathered in these assessments. So this includes the comments that have been made, the issues that were added, all the details of what questions were asked and what answers were provided. Such a report can then be turned into a PDF or can be added as a knowledge-based article within ServiceNow. This allows this assessment to live on after the assessment has been completed.